It's known as the holiday blues. Each December, nearly 65% of Americans say they don't feel as jolly as the folks they see on TV, in movies, and all across Facebook. About 25% say they fall into depression, and a small percentage consider suicide. In Summit County, our suicide rate is 3 times higher than the rest of the nation, and suicide is the second leading cause of death for people between the ages of 14 and 25. This might be one of the most beautiful places on earth, but every town in every corner of the world has a dark side. Even something simple like shorter days and longer nights can have real and devastating effects on mental health. Experts say isolation is a leading cause of depression, and when dozens or even hundreds of locals spend the holidays far away from loved ones, those feelings grow deeper and darker. But dangerous and debilitating depression is not a fact of life. In the thick of holiday season, we talked with counselors from the local branch of National Alliance on Mental Illness to hear about the holiday blues, signs of depression, and what you can do when you're feeling down. Just know this, you aren't alone. Phil Lindeman, Krystal 93 News Director, and I am in the studio today with folks from NAMI, that is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I'm with Betty Sarber. She is the High Country Colorado co-founder, and Ravi Jaishankar. He is a support group facilitator. So Ravi and Betty, thanks for joining today. Appreciate having you in here.
Thank you for having us, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Of course. And we definitely wanted to talk, because you were part of a support group for mental illness, the holidays. Holidays, it's all holiday cheer and happiness and Santa Claus, but that's not necessarily true, though, is it? Beneath the surface, people are going through all sorts of different things at the holidays. So what do you find, folks are suffering from when it comes to mental illness at the holidays?
Well, sometimes people even call it the holiday blues. NAMI's done research around it, and they've found that even up to 64% of people actually feel a little low around the holidays. So it's quite significant, and I want anyone to know out there that always wonders why holidays aren't quite as happy as they wish they were. They're not alone. A lot of us feel that way.
True, more than half, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some other numbers were showing that 64% say that they're affected, but about 25% say that it extremely affects them, that they're very affected and just don't feel quite right during the holidays.
Right. It can be low energy or just a depressed mood where you just don't feel happy, and you'd want to isolate. Some people want to isolate themselves from what's going on in their families or their friends. So it can take all sorts of forms. But the important thing to know is it's quite often common. It can be normal for people to feel this way. But don't just allow yourself to feel this way. Think of ways to make yourself move beyond this.
Okay, yeah.
And I'd like to add that I think that we need to be aware that there are significant physiological factors that contribute to this. So whether you have particular associations, negative or positive, regarding the holidays, based on your life history and circumstances, actually the amount of sunlight really mediates your brain chemistry. So just the amount of sunlight decreasing is a major factor in how mood and how our just contentedness works.
Yeah, and I've heard of SAD before, the seasonal affective disorder. Does that also play into it? Just the fact that seasons are changing, light is less?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a pretty significant piece in contributing to seasonal depression and other seasonal affective disorders.
Yeah, of course. And then I'm sure that on top of it, just the fact that holiday cheer is going around, and we were talking a little bit about you assume that when everybody else is happy and everybody else is doing the holiday thing, that's how you should be too. But like you were saying, Betty, that's doesn't have to be right. Not everybody is joyful at the holidays. It's just not exactly true.
A lot of things can affect that. You can have had a personal experience around the holidays that was quite sad for you. The loss of a loved one or things like that. And so the holidays are all wrapped up in the way we really are, but we have an expectation of ourselves that we're supposed to be happy, we're supposed to be cheerful, we're supposed to be joyous, and that expectation isn't always the case for us. So we have to practice self-kindness.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, there's quite a bit of pressure, whether it's from the consumerism or society, in my opinion, being allergic to emotion. You are only allowed to be a certain way during the holidays, and if you're not, then there's something wrong with you, and you're ruining it for others. And this is kind of the short-sightedness and a very constricted view on human health and human well-being, which goes from peaks to and falls and goes up and down. So the holidays can definitely trigger that kind of up and down in our psyche, and we need to be compassionate to that. We need to be accepting with that, and we need to really explore what that holds for us.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's definitely it's the sort of thing that it's all in your head. You're spending a lot of time in your head thinking about what other people are assuming you're thinking about, and like you said, assuming that other people want you to be happy. So that's how you should be too.
Yeah.
Spend a lot of time in that brain space that can sometimes turn out poorly, or at least lead to more issues in the future.
Right.
Now, tell me a little bit about your background. So how did you two both get involved with NAMI? And I know that the organization itself, at least the chapter here in Summit County, is relatively new, only about a year old or so.
Yeah, we're a little over a year old, and a group of us who live up here came together because we had found NAMI in other places. And so NAMI is one of the oldest grassroots organizations advocating for people who are living with mental illness and substance abuse, and also their loved ones. And so through our contacts or prior places we lived, we got exposed to NAMI, and then we're up here and we're going, hey, we need NAMI up here too, because it's basically forms a family, a group of friends around someone who's going through something that can feel pretty uncomfortable. There's a lot of stigma associated with mental illness and substance abuse, that it's a character flaw, that it means that you're less of a human being because you have some of these things. And the reality is it's a disease, it's something that affects people, and it's not by choice. And so we come around to try to help support people, educate and advocate. And so for myself, my son has some pretty significant challenges with mental illness and has for quite some time. And I'm kind of tend to be an optimistic person, like, well, how can we make it better? What could we do that would, what therapy, what would work here? And I had been pretty discouraged that, because he was affected at such a young age, that might not be a possible outcome for him to have a more positive future. And I went to my first NAMI presentation, which was two people who are living well, who have chronic mental illness.
Okay, and where was that at?
That was actually in Denver.
Okay.
I drove to Denver, and that night I started talking to the people down in Denver and said, we need NAMI in our because we don't hear this message of hope, we don't hear this message of recovery, and we don't hear this message that you can have a life that looks very, very much like anybody trying to deal with a chronic illness. You still have to manage it. But that doesn't mean you couldn't go on to have a career, a family, whatever it is you'd like to have.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the roadblock that it appears to be, or that you might even assume other people think that it is. Ravi, how did you get involved with volunteering, with being a counselor?
Yeah, so I moved to Summit County about a year ago from New Jersey, where I grew up. And in New Jersey, I majored in psychology. I met some really, really inspirational people that changed my life and really directed me inwards into my own kind of internal pursuit of discovering myself. And I had struggled with depression for as long as I could remember, but I actually didn't know it because I was just so numb. And I went through life kind of really disconnected. And when I started to learn what does this form of inquiry, like how can I find myself more, like that really led to a really significant growth process for me with the help of various mentors, my really wonderful therapist, and obviously my family friends when I started to open up and really find myself more. So I got involved with NAMI. I've been facilitating the support groups for those living with mental illness for over 6 years now, and it's been one of the most rewarding things that I could ever ask for in my life. I feel really blessed to have found everything that I found, and NAMI was a very big part of that.
Yeah, and like you were just saying, support groups and support systems and people outside of yourself are a huge help, especially when you're dealing with mental illness, and that is one thing that NAMI provides. What are some things that are provided right here locally that residents and locals can reach out for?
Yeah, we have 2 different support groups, and I'll talk about one of them and let Ravi share the other one. And so we have a support group, it's our family support group. And this is geared toward people who have a loved one that's living with mental illness and substance abuse. And we meet once a month on the 3rd Tuesday of the month at the Dillon Community Church. Shout out to Dillon Community Church for offering us a space. And we meet from 7 to 8:30 in the evening. And it's just a chance for everyone to share their story and gain a community of friends around them that get what it's like, that get that when one of your loved ones has mental illness or substance abuse issues, it affects the entire family. And it's not just isolated to your loved one. And that when you're trying to support someone with those conditions, it can really impact the rest of your life. Maybe you have other children. Maybe you have, you have a spouse that's not doing so well, but you have kids to help too. So it can really complicate your life.
True. And, it does really seem like mental illness sometimes has some correlation with here in the mountains, we think so much about injuries. Somebody blows their knee out and they say, I can't do anything. But with an injury like that, it seems a little more accepted to reach out for help, a little more accepted to reach out to your family and say, hey guys, my knee is busted. Can you help me up the stairs, or can you help me with this? Mental illness, though, has a little bit of that roadblock that keeps people from maybe asking for help sometimes.
Yeah, we call it the no casserole illness, because you're right. You have an injury up here, or you get diagnosed with cancer or some other major condition. Your friends and family rushes around you with offers of support, including casseroles. And we have found that for various reasons, not because people, our neighbors and friends aren't loving and kind to us, but there's a lot of stigma associated both with us sharing that information, and even when someone hears it, with feeling like, oh, do I show up? Maybe that's not right. Should I? But we want to tell the world it's okay to offer those casseroles to your friends and families and neighbors that are suffering, because it is by being a part and belonging to our community and our friends and our neighbors that we all feel better. We all heal.
Great, and you were saying that was the family-specific group. Now, Ravi, there's another group for specifically survivors?
Well, we don't call them survivors in this realm. They're referred to as peers, and it's specifically the connection support group for peers. And this group is for people living with, coping with, and healing from mental illness. And the format is kind of a very open format where we all check in. We develop and cultivate deeper connection with each other as we share what we all struggle with and how we've coped. So it's not a therapy group, it's a self-help group, and it's supported by everyone's contributions, and is done in a very non-judgmental, accepting, and kind of like an unconditional environment where we really meet the person where they are, as they are, not trying to change them, not trying to make them immediately better, but really letting them know that they are okay, that they are worthy, that they are accepted, and that there isn't anything wrong with them fundamentally.
Yeah, and you said yourself that you struggle with depression, and that reaching out to NAMI and finding a group for yourself really did help. How have you found yourself grow even through time? Even as now as a counselor, as a leader.
Oh, absolutely. NAMI and the other forms of help, especially through my therapist that I took advantage of when I was younger, those really gave me tremendous insights into where my issues were coming from, how I would get really caught up over things and really go deeply into depression. And seeing that reflected by others, seeing other people validate my experience and also accept me in that manner was tremendously healing. And it just provided a lot of reassurance that I was okay. So Nami, and especially giving back to Nami as a leader, as you mentioned, has been extremely rewarding, because to support people in their darkest moments is actually when you see them shine the most in certain ways, when you see them come up using their courage, using their vulnerability, really getting in touch with those really delicate, sensitive, tender aspects of themselves. There's a lot of love in that process, which is such a fulfilling, rewarding, and rich experience in connecting. And that really has been the hallmark of my experience. And I can say that, I mean, I'm so blessed to be part of this.
Yeah, it really does sound incredible. Like you were saying, the difference between going through it in a vacuum and just taking that one step to reach out and go just a little bit further. And then here you are, 6-7 years later, and you're still growing, still seeming like you're doing better with it. Now, there are other options as well, and there was another one called Nami Basics. Now, tell me a little bit about that course.
Yeah, so Nami Basics is one of our education classes, and it is geared for parents and caregivers of children and adolescents who are they're challenged. The child or adolescent doesn't have to necessarily have a diagnosis. We never really require people to have a diagnosis to join us at NAMI. But it's an opportunity. We spend 6 weeks exploring different topics, and we talk about the mental health care system. We talk about what the different levels of providers are. What is the difference between a therapist? What is the difference with a psychiatrist? We talk about that mental illness is a brain disorder, that it's a physical condition in your brain, and a lot of times people have a lot of shame and guilt around that. And we try to help them understand why it's really not, you're afflicted with an illness or your loved one is, it is not really because you didn't do something or you could have done something, or, like people always say with depression, they're like, well, just get out of bed, that's what I do. And
yeah.
The thing is, you can't compare your journey and your situation and your sadness necessarily with someone who's been diagnosed with severe depression.
Yeah, that not all situations are the same. Like we were talking about with the holidays, that it might seem like everybody else is enjoying the holidays and roasting chestnuts on an open fire, but that's not the truth. It just isn't. It simply isn't.
Right.
Great. Now, how can people reach out? Obviously there are these support groups. If somebody is, a little nervous, like you were saying, to show up at a support group, or a little nervous to, take that first step, how else can they find the help that they might need right now?
Yeah, we do individual outreach or advocacy, and so people can start with me. My phone number is 970-389-0808, or you can email me at, my name is Betty Sarber, so that's BETTYSARBER @gmail.com. And oftentimes what I'll do after the person reaches out to us is I will find, like, maybe Ravi will be the right person to have Ravi talk to this person, because we recognize that, sometimes people's anxieties are around groups. Yeah. And being in a group setting. Yeah. And so we don't want to say that support groups are for everybody. We just want them to know that we're there for them regardless of how, what kind of way in which they want to help reach out. And but Ravi spends a lot of time with people. I do. We have a lot of other people involved with NAMI that can make outreach calls. We'll meet at the coffee shop, have coffee or tea. Oftentimes, if people want us to, we try to be there for them. So if it's, you're nervous, you want to you think it's maybe time to seek professional help, which we think sometimes is just really, really helpful. We always say treatment works. Please don't not get treatment. And so we'll go to the office with you.
Oh, great. Yeah. Kind of help you walk through the process, especially again if it's a kind of a nerve-wracking process.
Well, yeah, you're kind of at a vulnerable state right then, and you're not necessarily feeling your most confidence about reaching out and seeking care. And so we just want people to know they're not alone, that we are out there, and that it's important that they know about us, and that it's important they know there's a lot of crisis services to reach out to, because we're not trained professionals. We're not mental health professionals. We're just like a friend or family member or neighbor who happens to have a lived experience with it.
Yeah, who happens to have, like you said, that background to kind of help a little bit. How can somebody help volunteering? So say somebody wants to get involved on that side of things, become a counselor, or maybe become somebody who can be a support.
Yeah, we love to have people volunteer. Our whole organization is volunteers. So please contact me. And again, depending on what you would like to spend your time doing volunteering, Nami, one of the great things about Nami is it's a nationwide organization. So when someone joins Nami and they're going to start being a support group facilitator, or like a teacher in one of our classes, there's actually a training program for them to go to. And so we just help kind of match people to what they'd like to do, and then try to facilitate getting them trained, and then start to set up more and more programming up here.
Great. Did either of you two learn anything maybe new or unexpected when you went through some of that training? Some stuff that stuck out to you as, wow, I didn't even know that.
I did. I love it, because I had a little support group for a few years up here, and I didn't know what I was doing. And honestly, I'm sorry to everybody who was part of my support group, because I don't think I was a very good facilitator. But Nami trained me about facilitating a support group. And they talked through some things, like some of the tough stuff, that can happen in a support group when someone's really, in a crisis. So the facilitation process, it's a structured facilitation process. We talk about group guidelines, principles of support. One of my favorite ones is that we use humor as a coping skill. We recognize that we can't solve all the problems. We are tremendous guilt busters. Yeah. We're like, take the guilt out of it, take the shame out of it. Let's all get real. Let's wear it on our T-shirts. I'm bipolar. I have depression, let's just bring it out, and so it's just really it's a different perspective on just living as a human being on this planet, and what are some of the challenges of that.
Yeah, and I'd say in my experience, it's actually been the connections that I've made to other people, especially to other people who've been struggling, to people who reach out and expose themselves in a way. There's not only is there tremendous beauty in that, but there's tremendous learning, and I've really learned a lot of subtleties, a lot of dynamics on how the human mind and the heart, how thoughts, emotions work, and especially in interpersonal relationships, how do you connect with another person, and how do you give them space to be themselves, and using I statements. And I mean, there's like a whole variety of very interesting things that have just improved my life in so many ways that I'm just very happy to have experienced.
Yeah, that would have almost been unexpected, education that you got out of it. Now, this might be a slightly loaded question. Do you feel as though you two have grown just as people from simply, being involved somehow, in even just the group side of things, the facilitation side of things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that when you can find something that you're passionate about, and you're able to express yourself in that and volunteer in that area, that you grow leaps and bounds as a human being, and it gives you such hope and insight and joy, because you really feel like you're helping people and connecting on a level of where you're always like, hey, I wish I had Nami 13 years ago. People, I really do. I wish I knew it existed 13 years ago.
True. Two things really stick out to me. It's humility and humbleness in noticing that not only are we all in this together, but that there's so much more that takes place outside of your own personal bubble. And to be able to see that and to be able to let other people in, it's been rewarding in that way. But also seeing that the amount that you hurt is really reflective to how much you can love. that one's capacity to love is reflected in the pain that one feels and in one's suffering. So just the opposite side of that coin of all the struggle that we go through is our capacity to love, which enables us to feel that much hurt. And really that has been a very transformative perspective for my life.
So
Can I add one other thing?
Mm-hmm.
Just as a thought is, we're often struck by the contrast. We talked about this a moment ago, but when you have a chronic illness, there's all sorts of support systems that come around you, both your community of support, but also the medical care system really revolves around trying to help you get through if you're diagnosed with diabetes or heart condition or cancer.
A lot of these things.
There's a lot of support put around you as a human being trying to get better and live the best life you can. And we just really, it's such a huge contrast for us, and we just think that we want it to change. We want that same level of support from our professionals, our mental health professionals, the systems of care, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, it would be. Now, I'm trying to think. Are there any mental illness, fundraisers, runs? Like there's so many runs and fundraisers for cancer and everything else. Anything for mental illness that you know of right now?
We do one. Nami does one. It's still in Denver. We'd like to someday bring it up to the mountains. It's called Nami Walks, and that's always in May. And that's one of our largest fundraisers. So people form teams and they ask friends to donate to their teams. And then it's just down in, it's kind of an easygoing walk. It's not a super athletic event like those of us up here who like that. We're thinking we need
There's no Nami triathlon.
Yeah, we need 2 classes. We need like the 25K over the mountain Nami run, and then we need the Nami walk that's kind of the cruise. But so that's a good point. We did a breakfast fundraiser, and I do want to give a shout out to Building Hope Summit County. I don't know if people know about that organization, but they have done an incredible job of trying to provide resources and connection. They even have a scholarship for counseling.
Yeah, I remember hearing that's one of the very cool programs that they do is helping somebody, if you're interested, that you can get into it with a little help from them as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, reaching out to the sports systems and like you said, Building Hope, another great resource here in Summit County. Well, thank you again to Betty and Ravi for coming in and talking about NAMI and how people can get involved and how you can make sure that you're staying happy and healthy at the holidays.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Of course. Thanks again. NAMI on Krystal 93.